Hello and welcome to Geek Warning, the tech podcast that puts just some of Ronan's coherent thoughts into one place, plus plenty more. I'm Dave Rome, Senior Tech Editor at Escape Collective, and joining me this week...
I'm Ronan Mc Laughlin. I don't have coherent thoughts.
Oh, okay.
And I'm Zach Edwards, and I think I have coherent thoughts, but I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. Well, good to see you all again. Yeah, I mean, it's another week of tech. The racing is starting to heat up as we head into classic season, and mountain biking has been happening as well. Sea Otter is just around the corner. So from a tech person, from a tech point of view, it's good time to be a cycling geek. But there has certainly been a lot on our minds this week, and a lot of tech that we're going to get through. But first, we're going to kick things off with a small little corrections corner, which is last week's episode. We spoke about online tire pressure calculators, and that Vittoria now had entered the market and were the first bicycle tire manufacturer to be in the space. Turns out that's not true. Schwalbe has had one for a little while, so can add them to the list, and one that we'll look to play with in future. But anyway, more and more options in that space.
Are we going to need a corrections corner next week for your pronunciation of Schwalbe?
Schwalbe. Schwalbe. Schwalbe.
I don't actually know how you do pronounce it properly, but I've always said Schwalbe, and then you just said Schwalbe, and it kind of threw me.
Schwalbe.
I did also see Goodyear has their own as well, but it also looks like it's just zips repurposed.
Ah, okay. That might make sense. Interesting. Everyone's getting in on it, and I think we're going to have an entire Geek Warning episode dedicated to brands we can't pronounce. Speaking of, Thule, the rack manufacturer, how do you say that? I've been doing this for 2 decades. I still have no idea. Anyway.
Pick your pronunciation.
Okay. Well, let's not get into that. Rather, I think there's a bigger topic we can cover, which is something that Zach has said has been on his mind. So, Zach, why don't you tell us what's been on your mind this last week?
Yeah, I had a friend the other day ask me what I thought the biggest tire at Roubaix would be, and I've kind of just been thinking about it a little bit since. So I thought that would be a fun, timely conversation.
Absolutely. And I think it aligns with something that one, we've seen a lot of chatter about on the internet. I think Cycling News have published a test related to 40 mil being the new road size. And Ronan, I know you've been busy up at all hours doing night laps with no traffic and no wind around. Early signs point to
a different result.
Okay, cool. So I mean, let's rewind. Last year, what was the widest tire we saw?
Well, having been at Roubaix last year and looking at those sorts of things, I actually went back this morning and just refreshed my memory, and I think 32 was quite prominent, both throughout the peloton, but also on the podiums of both races. Mm-hmm. And so like Mads Pedersen, Jasper Philipsen, and Balsamo also all had 32s. And in some cases, they actually blew up to like 33s, not because of the rim interaction, but yeah, it seemed like 32 was the popular choice last year.
Interesting. Okay, and then I guess tire clearance would have to be a factor in some of that, you'd assume. But I'd say most of the brands sponsoring these riders, if they really wanted to, like, Visma could be on the Caledonia if the tire ended up being so important, they could squeeze in a 34 or 35. I mean, most of these riders, most of these athletes would technically have access to bikes that could handle much wider tires. Like anyone on a specialized team could ride the Crux in a way, like these, cyclocross bikes used to be used as a choice in. Well, not cyclocross, adapted cyclocross bikes used to be used in Paris-Roubaix once upon a time.
I think the word you're looking for is gravel bike.
This is pre-gravel. This predates gravel. OG gravel cyclists. But I think there's probably a few factors here, but just purely looking at the tires, if 32 was the widest last year and has sort of held somewhat stable, it seems.
Sorry, it wasn't actually the widest. Was it Bahrain Victorious ran 35 GP 5000 AST or the
all-season one?
Not the STR. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So we are seeing some trend some signs of teams experimenting with wider. I certainly haven't seen beyond 35s though, as my understanding. With that said, where do you think we'll see things land this year?
I think more or less in the same spot. But
do you think more on 35s than previous, or do you think it'll just remain unchanged?
I would think probably around the 32 ballpark still, because that's so much more of a road race than a lot of people on the internet like to think. Like, bigger tires are obviously going to be less terrible on the cobbles, but there's still however many hundreds of kilometers of pavement. And I think people also still want to use the fast aero bike, not use a endurance bike or a cyclocross/gravel bike that would allow that bigger.
How much of the race after the final cobble section is road? It's off the top of my head. It's
technically speaking,
it's like
after
2K.
the final cobble section. Yeah, but it's not
It's
really.
not really cobbles.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think there's about 9k from the last proper sector, isn't there?
Yeah,
it's
something
through there. It gets to the town.
Yeah, something around 10, and then go through town.
Okay.
Until the velodrome.
But I think the bigger factor is like it is the balancing act you're sort of hinting at there, Dave, and that you've got a 260 kilometer race, whatever. Yes, there is 50 or 60 kilometers of it on the roughest pave you'll find, and there, a wider tire is certainly going to be better. But you have to balance that with what are you on for the other 200 kilometers of the race. And, 200 kilometers of World Tour racing, you do need something fairly optimal beneath you, especially the way we've seen the opening phases of the race going in the last 4 or 5 years or so, where it's just like, in some cases, it's blowing to pieces before they even get to the cobbles these days. And so if you're on a system that is 50 watts faster over the cobbles, but 70 watts slower over smooth surface, that's that you might not even get to the cobbles in the lead group. Made up those wattage numbers, by the way.
I have zero data on this, by the way, and I'd really I'd love to see some ultra high speed camera footage of this, of what I'm about to suggest. But I know more than a decade ago, you used to have the likes of Cancellara and Tom Boonen used to talk about technique on the cobbles, and that if you can ride with enough power, you basically stay over the top of them. And in my mind, and I don't know how you'd go about testing this, but in my mind, a slightly narrower tire with higher rebound might allow the tire to skip over the top more than a larger volume tire that has to be run at lower pressures in order to be as efficient, as low rolling resistance, I guess, once it's on the road, where that tire would potentially sort of sit in between and sort of more sag down and perhaps take the impacts and absorb the impacts more. Are you picturing what I'm saying? Am I about to have a corrections corner?
Definitely the faster you go, the easier it is, right?
Sure.
But
which it used to be, not specifically the two riders you're talking about there, Dave, but there used to be ways of assisting the rider in going faster. That maybe helped back in those days.
Like a button activated way, you mean? Or
there was various options. Some had buttons, some had needles, some had
okay.
More watts at their disposal.
Yeah.
Even still, I don't know. I could be way off base on this, but I think there might be something.
I don't think narrower, smaller tires is ever going to be the option for these cobbles. I've ridden them on 28s, and it's absolutely horrendous.
Sure.
Then having ridden 32s on at Flanders cobbles, which aren't as bad, it's significantly more pleasant.
Yeah. So if the race was only cobbles, then take out the road sections, take out the final 10K. If it was just on cobbles, are you both saying wider is better?
If the entire 260K was all on cobbles, I would want a full suspension mountain bike. If you wanted to be able to get off your bike and walk the next day, I guess that's the one thing I have with this race too, is there's so many people on the internet on comments and forums, and they have such strong opinions about pros should be running this tire, or I think in 5 years everyone's gonna be on a 40 mil tire or whatever. Very strong opinions, but I think if you've not ridden Roubaix cobbles, I have a really hard time taking your opinion into consideration. It's hard to describe how horrendously awful they are compared to any other form of road or washboard or anything. They're so awful. So you want a bigger tire to make it less awful, but most of the sectors are only a kilometer or two long. So you just have to essentially get through it without flatting to make it to the road section where the race is probably happening.
So, I mean, that's kind of my point, though. Like, I'm not saying if the race is 250k of cobble, then obviously riders can't ride those sections at 500-600 watts and stay over the top of the cobbles. But if the race is just 60 kilometers in little segments of, I don't know what I'm saying anymore. But yeah, like if the riders are able to stay at 500 watts over all the cobble sections, is still wider better? I guess we don't know. Yeah, that's the unknown. But I guess the bigger answer is that's not the case. There's all the road. Yeah, it's not just cobbles. It is also a road race. And
it's a road race that the speeds are getting higher every year. So like all of the aero things make more of a difference. Like I think instead of people being like, oh, they should all be on 40 mil tires, like Visma historically the last few years has been on like a shallower wheel, and a lot of teams have, because it's like their gravel wheel, or they're like all road with a wider inner width that's like a 30 to 40 mil depth rim. And I would think I would see more deeper wheels that are kind of, I don't know, maybe around that 25 internal to kind of support a larger tire, like not excessively large, but a larger tire while also gaining aero.
The thing about everybody should be on 40 is everybody cannot be on 40s because it's actually illegal by UCI regulations. The maximum diameter of your wheel cannot be more than 700 millimeter, and you put on a 40 mil road tire, it's going to be like 720. And I don't know, maybe the UCI don't even know they have that rule, but that rule does.
That seems like a rule that the UCI would remember they have like 2 days after the result has been,
or
on the start line.
Sorry, nobody can race today.
And then the other thing, Zach, is you're exactly as you're saying there. It's we're talking about the balancing act of tire size, but there's the balancing act of what tire size fits within the rest of the setup that you want to race with. And so aero bikes and that, you're going to be, maybe 32 you're maxing out most of the aero bikes these days. And so that's also teams want that aero setup increasing. Like we've seen the Domani, we've seen the Roubaix. No, sorry, the Domani still, the Trek team pretty much all still ride the Domani at Roubaix, but the Roubaix has disappeared from the Specialized teams.
I thought Mads was on the Madone last year, because it was before they came out with the...
Mads is probably on the Madone, but I know definitely a lot of the other riders are on. Maybe I'm thinking of the women's team then, but the Domani was one of the Domani. Yeah, was one of those few types of frames that was still there last year.
Interesting. Ronan, do you know off the top of your head what the widest tire you could run is before you hit that outer diameter limit?
So I haven't measured a 38, but I'm thinking it's probably going to be around there somewhere.
Right. Okay.
And I think the other reason we will see 32s most popular again this year is because currently Continental, for example, don't offer the GP 5000 STR in a 35. They only offer the ASTR, which is going to be slower rolling on smoother surfaces. And then like Vittoria, they only have the Corsa Pro again in 32.
They do those in a 34, I thought.
The Corsa Pro was 32 only. Perhaps
the Control they definitely do.
Yeah. And I'm not sure. Perhaps Visma do actually ride the Control. It would probably make sense to do that at Roubaix, but
So the two Pirelli sponsored teams probably have the best options as far as tires.
So Pirelli have everything up to 40. Not everything. It's 28, 30, 32, 35, and 40. Actually, I have it's the P0 Race TLR that I've been testing. I got them in September last year, waiting for good weather conditions to do some testing. And while I still need to test the 40s on very rough surfaces, I don't have cobble sections around here to test them on. Certainly on smoother pavement at racing speeds that Paris-Roubaix will be doing, you do not want to be on 40s. And I'd go as far as to say, if speed is your thing, you don't want to be on 40s, seemingly, so far, based on the results I have.
Support Escape Collective. If you're listening to this on the free feed and you're therefore not a member of Escape Collective, now's a good time to join, because if we get enough new members, we will fund Ronan his own pave sector.
Does Ronan want his own pave sector?
I wasn't thinking pave sector. I was maybe just thinking like a
A holiday.
An hourly rate for night shifts. That considering I'm out on a greenway on my own until 1 a.m. in the morning just to try and figure out what's the fastest tire.
But jokes aside, please support us. Anyway,
we were talking about Visma too. Do we think they'll use their tire pressure adjustment contraption?
Almost certainly.
Yeah, you think?
I know they've worked a lot with Grava to sort of not even the system, but refine like the handlebar interface.
Yeah.
And so I think it's all with a view to actually using it. Yeah.
How? Because the hub shell is quite large, right?
It's not.
Like, do we think that is going to negatively impact aero significantly?
Very good question. And probably another balancing act. It's like, is it net faster or net slower?
Right.
That reminds me on Instagram, outside is Brendan, who just does like April Fool's creations, but every day of the year. Did one, and it was the day before April Fool's, so I'm pretty sure it was just his normal like status quo. But he put like a little electric tire inflator and created like a 3D printed mount, put it on a hub, and so he had like this electric tire inflator mounted inside the wheel that could like reinflate your tire while you ride. And I can't remember how it came up, but someone in the comments was like, "Oh, this could be like a saleable product," and I'm like, "It is, and you don't have to do anything." Anyway, it turns out he invented something without knowing that it already existed in a much better actual usable format. Like he invented it as a joke, but it does a better version that you don't need to get your hand in between the hub to turn on. It does exist. So anyway,
I've seen that go wrong for people putting their hand into moving wheel.
Yes, yep. Don't do it.
Joking aside, though, like just going back to the tire testing I've been doing, I have like got 4 identical wheel sets, various different tire sizes. I've got like a bit of a test mule bike setup, and the idea is that I can just, the wheels are identical, the cassettes, the rotors, everything is identical. The only thing that changes is the tire width, and so I'll do runs on one tire width and then swap the wheel set and do it on another. But at one point I was like, could I get 4 sets of Grava wheel sets? Because then I could just adjust the pressure without stopping between runs, because at the moment I have to stop between runs. But I didn't even look into that because it's just not, I can't get 1 set of those, never mind 4.
That is a cool thought though. But I'm going on a tangent here, but I've long dreamed about having like identical bikes for test purposes. Largely mountain bikes to do like back-to-back testing of same suspension of different suspension systems or different drivetrains. But it's not one I've been able to realize either, and I'm not fast enough to get signed by a factory team, which would just give me that anyway.
And I think if you speak to the pros, they will tell you that there is no such thing as 2 identical bikes.
That's the other issue. Yeah. The more you know, the more you realize it's an impossibility to have. So, Anyway, all right. So to wrap this segment up, your Zach, widest tire. Where do you think we're going to sit this?
Widest tire in the bunch or widest tire on the podium?
Yeah. Ooh, let's get both.
I think in the bunch would probably be like a 35 Conti if Bahrain chooses to run those again, and whatever other Conti teams. But I don't expect to see them on the podium.
32/33 measured.
Yeah, that's probably maybe a 34, but probably 32.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ronan? Ronan's rigging it. He's currently DMing some riders to say they're going to ride.
Well, I mean, like, what's Vanderpool going to run? Probably 32s, because that's all that fits in his canyon. Tade, maybe bigger than a 32, but probably not, because they've got wide rims, so a 32 is going to measure 33 or so. And he's not going to run the all-season Conti tire. Last year, Philipsen was on the podium. Mods, like, they're probably also in the 32s that measure a bit wider because of wide rims. Curious, Ronan's deep research. Typing away.
I want to say something, but I'm not sure.
Say it.
The answer is 40 or 400. And it makes a big difference. And if I get it right, nobody notices, but if I get it wrong, I look like an idiot. I think the widest we will see is a 35. I think the widest on the podium really depends on what Little Trek do with those new Pirellis. I wouldn't be surprised to see them run 35s, but I'm going to say 32s because in my testing of 35s, like the difference that we're talking about in rolling resistance could be the equivalent of adding as much as like a couple of hundred of extra meters of climbing in the race. And like if you just picture it that way, would you want to add an extra 200 meters of elevation gain
for slight comfort on some cobbles?
Yeah. So no, I'm not even comparing it to comfort. I'm just thinking about like that, the effect that would have on your average speed for, say if you added 200 meters of elevation gain into a 100 kilometer ride, that if you just pictured that as one block of climbing, you added in one additional climb with 200 meters of elevation gain, it would significantly impact your speed and the power requirement to maintain the same speed if you wanted to do it that way. So yeah, I think I'm going to go with 32 on the podium.
Interesting. I'm going to sit on the fence on this because I'm the person that just 10 minutes ago was saying narrower might be faster on cobbles because it'll skip over the top. When I say narrow, I meant like 32s rather than like a 40 at low
like
pressure. Just to clarify, I'm not for a second suggesting anyone goes back to 25s in Paris-Roubaix. But yeah, it's
I mean, a 25, it kind of like skips in between the stones, so it like gets down to the dirt, which is smoother, right?
Yeah, it's cyclocross in the mud.
I mean, what is amazing is like, and like Sean Kelly always told us the story of like his, I think it was his second Roubaix one. He did the entire thing without puncturing on, I don't know, I'm assuming he's probably on 23s or something back in
140 PSI.
That might have been the time before. That might have been even before the narrow. So he might have been on a 25. I don't know, but anyway, he wasn't on a 28. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And his take was just like when you're in the best condition, you have so much spare capacity. You're not on the limit. You have so much spare capacity. You can choose your line. You can navigate better, and so you miss the shit, as he called it. You don't crash, you don't puncture, and you win the bike race.
Yep.
Which kind of gets back to Van der Poel and Pogacar and the likes. They have so much extra ability. Like, you know, Van der Poel can, Zach, we were talking about this the other day, Van der Poel can get away with making suboptimal aero choices just because he's so much better than most of the competition unless Pogacar turns up. That's a whole other topic.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. Yeah, I think it sounds like you're both agreeing. 32s on the podium, 35s the widest in the peloton. Ronan, your little tidbit about them not being able to run 40s because it goes over the maximum diameter of the UCI allowable diameter. I think I've heard you say that before. I'd forgotten about it, so thank you for that tidbit. That is very interesting and very important.
Have we asked any UCI officials if they even know that that's a rule?
No, let's not bother. How can you email or contact the UCI and ask them, do you know your rule is a rule? I mean, you just have to assume that they know.
I guess I'd be more like cornering an official at the race and be like, do you know this is a rule?
All right, well, yeah. Tyre widths at Roubaix. One I'm not willing to put money on just yet, but dare I say it's not going to be quite as wide as some people think riders should be on. And as Ronan pointed out, there's
not going to be mountain bike.
Definitely no mountain bike tires, because that is a blatant infringement on those UCI rules we just discussed.
It's a blatant infringement on gravel.
It is, on the trademark of gravel. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on. I guess, yeah, big week in tech. It is trade show season. Taipei Cycle Show just wrapped up, which is historically more of an industry show. It has historically been more of a place that brands and distributors would go to meet directly with the manufacturers or the brands over in Taiwan and sort of put forward their, whether they're shopping for new parts to spec their bikes with or actually placing orders. There'd be a lot of like closed door meetings. So in the year that I went a few years ago, like SRAM, for example, had a very big booth, but they didn't really have any product on display. It was just like all meeting rooms that are sort of for one-on-one meetings. It has been getting more and more public in a way, and as a result of that, more and more media have been going to the show. And one of the products that seems to be getting quite a lot of coverage are the new and up-and-coming brands in the drivetrain space that have sort of been simmering away and designing at a rapid pace and, dare I say, borrowing a lot of inspiration from the likes of Shimano and SRAM in terms of design. So the two big ones that I guess I saw were Wheeltop and LL2. Or L2. And yeah, I think they're interesting. They're basically gone from being these like really, really cheap bottom dollar brands that you'd find on AliExpress that just did like kind of crummy mechanical groups, and they're coming up pretty quickly. Like Wheeltop has just shown its EDS OX system, which is a wireless derailleur and shifter. $400 for both the shifter and derailleur, US dollars. And the derailleur, it's 7 to 13 speed compatible. So you can sort of tell it how many gears and the spacing, and it's even adjustable between each cog. You can go in and override the exact derailleur position for each shift. So, say you've got a derailleur, a cassette with some wonky spacing, or you basically want it to do a spacing that perhaps isn't programmed in. You can effectively program it in yourself. There's some interesting things here, but I guess the question mark for me is they're very cheap. They seem to have some cool features, but what would it take for us to start seeing these like show up semi-regularly into like a local group ride?
First, it would have to probably be like, I don't know, OE spec on bikes from major manufacturers to get like mass adoption. There's always going to be those outliers of people that build bikes in a maybe not stock way, right? So they're like finding parts online or whatever. But I think the problem with these group sets too is there's little information out there and they're not bought through normal channels. So that kind of makes the adoption a little bit harder, I would say. Where right now it's kind of like you kind of have to know about it and also
it's like a hidden secret.
Seek it out, right? I also think too, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, everyone's like micro shift, the next big thing, because they had mechanical shifters that were compatible with Shimano derailleurs. And when was the last time you saw a Shimano or micro shifter on a bike? Like it's really hard to break into that market for more than just a few outlier bikes here and there.
Yeah, I mean, people have been riding these some of these Chinese origin group sets for a little while, like GP Lama, friend of Escape. He's been spending some time on it and actually had pretty positive things to say. But when things go wrong, that's the other thing I think that's worth noting here is, generally speaking, you're not easily going to be able to locally warranty this, but it might be a case of maybe the brands have the margin just to send you a replacement without caring about what happens to the product. Maybe these are more in the disposable, replaceable segment of the market than something that is designed for repair. So
right. I mean, I guess I would just assume like if something goes wrong, that warranty is just out of the question. It's you're buying a new derailleur or a shifter or whatever. Like maybe you could go through channels to try and get a warranty, but I feel like it's kind of one of those you get what you pay for.
Yeah, normally like AliExpress, I'd say, kind of comes to your defense. Like they act in your defense and sort of typically will push the brand to replace it for you because it's their platform. But yeah, certainly it's still not like going to a local bike shop and having someone face to face fix this problem for you.
The looking at the pictures coming out of Taipei this week, the new 2L2 DI2 Durace, to call it what it actually looks like. I think that those sorts, I mean, that's obviously intentional as well, but that actually will help break through as well because it actually just looks, some like previously these cheaper options just looked a bit janky in some ways or whatever. They kind of looked as cheap as they were, whereas you look at that group set and
I
haven't seen pricing yet because I haven't seen anything yet.
Yeah.
But it looks pretty. It looks pretty Durace.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like these products are getting increasingly polished and at a very, very rapid rate. And so I guess that's the point is like, if the product itself is getting to a point where it's good enough to compete with Shimano and SRAM, it's like the big question mark for me is what will it take for them to actually break through? Because you see them starting to sponsor like local kind of continental level teams, like they're starting to dabble in sponsorship, but they're still relatively hard to come by in most of the markets that I've seen, right? Like you're still having to buy them from AliExpress. I'm still not seeing them on people's bikes around here. I'm certainly not seeing them equipped on complete bikes, except maybe State Bicycle Co. out of the US. Like they're kind of doing some rebranded stuff, but it's pretty fringe. So yeah, anyway, I think it's one to carefully watch, and I'm sure Shimano and SRAM are watching it closely and are trying to guard their territory as much as possible. But yeah, you see the likes of Campagnolo basically get completely decimated from the OE market, and you kind of have to question, like, what would it take for these brands to break in?
That's the other thing I was thinking. It's like Campagnolo made that super record wireless a couple of years ago with the anchors built into the front and rear derailleurs to act as batteries. And then you look at what L2 have done this week, and it's just like, which is the legendary brand? Which is the... It's just, I mean, looks wise, I never thought I'd say it, but the L2 has Campagnolo sort of well beat at this point.
I mean, to rewind a little bit on this is like FSA tried to break into this market, and I would say by all things I've seen, they failed. Now TRP.
You mean you've just never seen it?
I've never seen it. Like I have seen them, but it's definitely not something you see equipped on bikes today. TRP is now the latest entrant. Again, a massive powerhouse in bicycle manufacturing. That's Tektro. They make brakes for just about everyone. And they would have the braking down pat, which is arguably the big barrier for the likes of Wheeltop and L2 to get across. But again, I don't think we're going to see TRP gain significant OE presence in the drop bar market.
Even on the mountain bike side, I don't think they will.
They've been pushing, but yeah, I don't think they will. So I don't know. I see there's a duopoly in the market between Shimano and SRAM, and I could really question when or how we'll see these other brands come through. And yes, I'm sure they'll keep driving down prices, but I think there's some bigger hurdles to come across. I guess another big trend out of the Taipei Cycle Show and a big talking point was bigger wheels. So big that they definitely will not fit within the UCI's road drop bar limitations. But yeah, 32-inch mountain bike wheels seem to be on the horizon, should I say. We've got Maxxis doing prototypes. There's carbon fiber rims from like Nexty floating around. There's word of suspension manufacturers starting to create prototypes. Trek in the past has spoken about testing this thing. So yeah, there's a lot of rumors floating around, and I guess we're going to be dedicating a little bit of Escapes tech resources to investigate it, and probably one to come off the back of Ciota that will be looking into how likely we are for this mess to come into the industry and what it aims to achieve, and whether we're ready for this or not. I wasn't a 29er skeptic. I was on it pretty quickly, but having seen the sort of pushback that got, I'm not sure we're ready for yet another wheel size. But I guess one to discuss.
I thought you were going to say you weren't a 29 skeptic, but now that you're older.
No. So, all right. Well, from trade shows to new product season, let's jump into quick tech bites, which there's quite a few new products we're talking about. There's also a bit of industry news we're talking about. So on the top of the list, let's get one of the more fun, less affordable things out of the way. CaneCreek are updating their eeWings, their welded titanium crankset. Zach, I assume you've installed a few pairs of these over the years. What would you say were some of the less ideal features?
I mean, the cost would be the first one, I would say.
Yep. They're still US $1,200. Okay.
Yes. They
no chainring included.
Used, I guess, particularly on the all-road side, they used SRAM's 3-bolt mounting pattern, which has been outdated for a number of years now.
So that's now moved to SRAM's 8-bolt mounting pattern, which allows them to use all the new power meter spiders and all the new rings. But which is great. My other complaint that has always been is on the road ones. The Q factor width was exceptionally wide. They did not fix that. Still exceptionally wide. I think it's at 160 mil, if I'm not mistaken, but it might be 150 mil now that I'm thinking about it. I shouldn't guess at those numbers. But crank length wise, they've got mountain bike cranks will start from 160 mil length. Their all-road cranks will start from 165 mil length. But yeah, certainly that Q factor, I'd say not an ideal fit for like a pure road bike. It's sort of more of a gravel wide sort of width. Other than that, the other big thing, they've reduced the overhang. So the part that sits below the pedal used to be quite thick. And I guess that would sort of be the first thing to hit the ground if you had ground clearance issues, whether it was not necessarily in pedaling through corners, but more like off-road ground clearance. So they've greatly reduced that, which is cool to see. And you can now install the things with an 8mm hex key. No more 14mm hex that you won't be able to tighten while on the trail. So I think that's a welcome change, even if it doesn't look quite as cool in photos. Next on the list, RockShox much anticipated Reverb AXS dropper seat post. This one has been seen everywhere. They very noticeably moved the battery location and the actuator unit from the top of the seat post head down to basically the top of the rigid, non-moving part of the post. Very much where Fox has placed theirs on their Neo wireless dropper. I've been using one of these and I've been liking it, but I would say it still doesn't quite solve all my issues with the previous AXS dropper. So, but yeah, some key details. They've greatly expanded the travel range. It's 100mm up to 250mm travel options in 25mm increments. That's absolutely an enormous length of dropper, that 250mm. I think that makes it, if I'm not mistaken, the longest dropper on the market, and easily the longest wireless dropper on the market. They've really extended the service intervals, increasing that to 300 hours, and they've increased the amount of service you can do to the thing in terms of the number of parts actually available. So they've also reduced the price by almost $100 US, now $550 US, but not including a remote. Zach, you've probably got quite a bit of experience with the previous Reverb. You asked me before we started recording whether they've dropped the weight.
Yes, I did. That was most people's complaint over on the XC side of the spectrum.
Yeah,
most people's complaint.
Yep. It's a heavy post. I couldn't help but laugh because they've overhauled the entire thing. There's like not a single shared component to the old one. Internally, it's completely different. It's now air only inside. The whole thing is a ground up redesign. And on my scales, they are within a gram of each other.
That's impressive to be that consistent, at least.
It is. So anyway, yeah, they didn't fix that. I think that still remains a barrier for pure XC use. It is a very heavy seat post. But I guess the flip side is that the weight is no longer at the highest point. So less swing weight, I guess, which matters in
But now you can put a saddlebag on it. So maybe that counteracts.
And now you can put a saddlebag on it.
High weight.
It is. Yep, it is saddlebag compatible. So, but yeah, anyway, one to check out. It's not one I'm actually writing up on Escape. It'll be in our daily news, but I'll be looking to do a proper review in the next few weeks and comparing it to that Neo post as time allows. So, yeah, I think some interesting stuff there. And I think wireless droppers honestly make a whole lot of sense, especially for anytime you got an e-bike involved. But yeah, I'm a big fan of wireless droppers, but some more time needed on this one. Speaking of SRAM, it looks like they got hacked. Not a lot of news on this one yet. Not a lot of people talking about it. But their systems went down for a few weeks last week, just coming back online. And dealers basically globally, or predominantly out of the US, but globally, were unable to place orders with their B2B site and also unable to lodge warranties. Sounds like SRAM caught this early, that there was a quote cybersecurity issue, and basically shut down all systems to prevent anyone from playing around and digging around and taking out anything. So but yeah, I think Zach, this one you noticed a week or so ago.
Yeah, obviously I'm away right now, so I was trying to place an order so that things could be shipped and arrive when I get back. And yeah, the website, I kept having issues with it. The first couple times I tried, there was just like the website just wouldn't work at all. And then a couple days later I tried again, and then I was getting an error message. Yeah, a week or so went by, and then it finally worked. The annoying thing was there was just no communication from SRAM. Like, it could have just been a simple email like, hey, our B2B's down, try again next week. But alas, there wasn't.
The rumor I heard, this was not confirmed by SRAM, but the rumor I heard was that it was basically a company-wide digital shutdown.
Super fun.
So that might explain why no communication went out over this. That They just went basically fully dark as soon as they thought there was a threat. Quite interesting, but yeah, they're back online now. It seems like it's behind them, but yeah, quite a scary one for them. So I guess more will come to light on that one as we know more. But other industry news. Yeah, Brose, big German motor division, electric motor specialists. They have a very large, well, not very large, but large enough bicycle division that was basically the sole manufacturer of all motors or Specialized bicycles or current motors, and Specialized has long had a partnership with them. They've also been helping with the motor systems from SRAM. I don't know if that's for manufacturing or more just advice and technical assistance, but yeah, they have been involved in the SRAM motor. They have sold their bicycle division, so Brose has been sold to Yamaha, which is quite interesting because Yamaha was already in partnership with making motors for giant bicycles, and they had also tried their hand at their own brand, which they recently pulled out of the US. And I guess, yeah, maybe this aligns with some of that. Maybe, who knows? Maybe they pulled out of the US because of the link now to Specialized and the placement there. I'm obviously speculating, but I think this is an interesting one, and it turns Yamaha in from being a somewhat reasonable threat to the bicycle industry as a very large automotive outsider to being a even bigger threat. So I think, this basically just immediately with that purchase puts them in a position that makes them one of the bigger players in the space.
It's just impressive Yamaha's breadth of industries that they work in.
Yes. Yeah. So
motors to e-bikes to pianos.
Yeah. So I mean, Bosch, Bosch is an absolutely ginormous company already. Very much the leader in the e-bike space. They're first mover, and I think they're still in many ways still holding on to that position. But yeah, I mean, this is a pretty big move for the e-bike world. So one to watch. Also coming out of the industry, coming out of Taiwan, is SRAM and Velo. Velo being the saddle manufacturer that makes saddles for just about every brand, or most brands, should I say. They make the more saddles than anyone else. That's a safe thing to say. They have partnered. They're basically going to be repurposing carbon waste from SRAM's Taiwanese manufacturing, which is, if you consider like all the zip brands, wheels, excess carbon from like C-posts, handlebar manufacturing, all the off-cut stuff seems to be heading to Velo, and they're going to be, by the sounds of it, turning it into thermoplastic. So they've said mixing it with nylon allows them to create a material. To me, that sounds like thermoplastic carbon. It'll be interesting to see in what form, but yeah, pretty certain it's going to end up in the bases of saddles. So that's a cool one to see, reduced waste, and yeah, I guess everyone benefits. SRAM has a way to reduce their emissions, and Velo does too. So nearby collaboration, that one. Lucky last, not a serious one, but we've just had April Fools this week. Escape Collector didn't publish anything on the matter, but there were a few things out there that made me laugh. But for me, the one that took the cake was Wheels Manufacturing announced a random derailleur hanger of the month club, which you can sign up for, and for about, I think it was $30 you can have a random derailleur hanger sent to you each month with a commemorative card of what bike it may or may not fit, which I thought was just spectacular. And you can sign up for the year subscription and get your wall mount that allows you to put them on the wall and cherish the hangers you'll never use. So, but why I love this so much is I actually thought it's like, I think that might be something I'd sign up for.
And it's like collecting coins, right? You just like have your little book and yeah.
It is. So, I mean, it'd be a really smart way for them to get rid of all the hangers they can't, like the ones that don't move, right? Like the ones they made 10 years ago and no one has bought since then, because there's hundreds of different hangers. And yeah, but anyway, I thought that was actually one of those April Fool's jokes that should be a real product.
I mean, it is a real product. It would just be like...
a real option.
Service, yeah.
Yeah, so... Anyway, like I say that as a kid who used to like collect, like, get the monthly magazines that came with like the gemstones on the cover, and you'd put together a gemstone collection, and each month you'd get the magazine that would tell you the history of the gemstone. And I mean, these things have been done in the past.
Was it just me, or was there like way more April Fools than usual, to the point where I was like kind of just glad that we didn't do anything?
I think it's more Instagram perhaps putting them forward, maybe, or maybe it's just who we follow. Yeah,
there was, I can't remember, maybe it was Instagram, but maybe it was Facebook. But I was scrolling through something last night, and it was just like I got to like a couple of minutes worth of scrolling, and I hadn't yet got to a non-April Fool's, and I was like, I'm done with this.
Yeah. It's kind of a day of the month to stay away from, even though I'm guilty in the past of having done a lot of chain wax related April Fools. Ben Delaney this year did a new Castelli bib short with a 6 chamois gravel specific short, which was quite funny because the video that came from that was quite humorous. Perhaps the thing that made me giggle most was remembering that I actually did that for real once. So I don't know. I'm sure I've told the story on the podcast before, but yeah, I did a single speed mountain bike race that was in the mud. I thought it'd be really hilarious to have tear off skin suits. So each lap I'd come through and tear it off and have another fresh skin suit underneath that was fully clean. Anyway, long story short, I didn't factor in how much of a pain it would be getting a skin suit over shoes. And so I was a lap behind by about the third undressing. So anyway, very good. All right. Well, let's, I think that's a good place to...
Can I interrupt you before you do wrap it up,
please.
Dave? I want to promote Performance Process.
Sure.
This week's episode is with CyclingSpy, the anonymous account on Instagram, which was kind of fun to get set up. And we've done, listeners beware, we've had to distort CyclingSpy's voice in that to ensure that he remains anonymous. And that distortion may well be something that we're experimenting with on an ongoing basis, because CyclingSpy is now going to be a regular on Performance Process. So, CyclingSpy, if that is your real name, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
That answers the next question. Are you me?
If I said no, that would sound like something you would say. With the new Giro Arrowhead, it makes the front of the rider look more like one object, and I think once you start understanding why, the bike and the rider will start looking more like one machine rather than a rider sat on top of a bicycle.
Robert Chung, he asked if there is any chance teams and brands are actively use stuff knowing that you'll spot it or you'll post about it as like a disinformation tactic to mess with other teams' minds.
I feel quite honoured that Robert Chung would send something in. It makes me feel quite good to be recognised by someone like that. I don't know is the answer. Maybe. I don't think so. I think lots of teams have enough things to do and not enough time to do it that they're probably trying to focus on going fast, even if some of the teams aren't necessarily doing a very good job of that. I'm very keen not to take the credit for what is a fantastic account, so I will once again reiterate that I am not the cycling spy, which of course is something I might say if I was the spy.
My question is does that mean you found a way to talk to yourself efficiently?
This... I think I had that pretty efficient previously, and that I could talk to myself without even other people even hearing it.
Yeah.
But other people will hear this conversation. I think there are ways and means now of escape of yourself, Dave, probably, and our editor knowing for certain that this is not me.
Okay.
And I think CyclingSpy's insight that he shares and his explanation for why we're probably not even at 10% of peak aero demonstrates more than I ever could that I am not CyclingSpy.
Okay. Deal. Okay. All right. Understood. Will this be available for free, or will you have to be a member of Escape Collective?
This is members only.
Okay.
CyclingSpy was already a member of Escape Collective.
Interesting.
And certainly going forward. So we're going to have probably a monthly show with CyclingSpy. And we're gonna he's an aerodynamics expert. He's anonymous, he's independent, and so we'll have him on the show we'll probably discuss whatever the topic du jour might be at each month, and then the second half of the show we're going to dedicate to listener questions.
Okay. You eliminated, you said he's a member, you said he's male. Does he have glasses?
He has a magnifying glass. He's a spy, man. What do you expect?
Actually, I don't think you even had video on when you had your conversation. So, all right.
Yes, I mean, Escape Collective members on the Performance Process Discord channel will already know that he is a member because he's sort of been hanging out in the Discord chat also. It never ceases to amaze me that Performance Process Discord, some of the conversations that are happening in there are just unbelievable. And like some of the actual conversations happening and then members going off and like creating things to make aero testing easier or analyze chunk method results or doing X, Y, and Z. It's pretty. I mean, just this week we had one of the manufacturers of a drag measurement device discussing with members what might be the best model to bring such a thing to market, and getting feedback on pricing and also like it's just one example.
Okay. Well, yeah, all things you need to be a member for. So yeah, if you're interested in hearing from the CyclingSpy in depth with Ronan, then be a member. And speaking of being a member, Ask a Wrench is coming up just about now. And that this week is with Brad Copeland and myself. Zach, you'll be joining us in a few weeks' time once you're back in the right time zone for that conversation. But so this week with Brad and I, we are going to be answering some questions related to finding mystery clicks under braking. There's a question about cutting steerer tubes and how that may or may not affect the resale value of a bike. There's a chat of really tight SRAM XDR cassettes, whether there's anything that can be done there. And we answer a question about what tool is best when someone packs something horrible on a ride. Very cryptic. And to understand any of that, you will need to become a member of Escape Collective. Head to escapecollective.com/join, become a member, and enjoy all that we have to offer in all of our podcasts. You get the full episodes every week straight into your podcast player of choice. You also get to click everything we publish on the site without seeing a pop-up asking you to become a member. Wouldn't that be nice? All right, it's time for Ask a Wrench.